What if I told you the legend of the French pirate queen who painted her ships black with blood-red sails was actually just the tip of the iceberg? Because the real history of Jeanne de Clisson involves political blackmail, drama with the Pope, and a revenge plot so aggressive it humiliated the King of France. Buckle up for the real Lioness of Brittany, the pirate queen we can all aspire to be. Jeanne was born around the year 1300 into the uber-rich Belleville family in France. She grew up surrounded by maritime trade, politics, and high-stakes land deals. She was not some random peasant girl who watched Pirates of the Caribbean and felt inspired. She was educated, clever, and maybe just a little bit entitled. In my opinion, anyway. At the age of 12, she married a Breton nobleman named Geoffrey. By 14, she was a mother. When Geoffrey died, Jeanne became the sole legal guardian of their young heir and his massive fortune. Imagine being a widow, a single mom, and the manager of empire-sized fortune by age 15. That is a terrifying amount of pressure for someone in the throes of puberty. Then there was a whole attempted marriage fiasco, where allegedly Jeanne was running around telling everyone she was married to some dude named 𝐂𝐻𝐿. Guy, who was fully not on board with the idea of being married to Jeanne, ended up begging the Pope to intervene and either confirm that the two were not officially married or annul the marriage altogether. So that's a little embarrassing, but I did weird stuff when I was a teen, so who am I to judge? Eventually, when Jeanne was about 30 years old, she found her sweetheart, the very wealthy lord of Brittany, Olivier de Clisson. The two were a great match, getting married in 1330. But Jeanne was no sucker, and in 1334, Jeanne realized her cute new hubby, Olivier, wasn't setting aside the inheritance promised to her and her children in their prenup. And even though she didn't have the original paperwork, she wasn't taking any L's. She petitioned France's King Philip VI directly, who granted a formal investigation into the matter. And just getting an investigation from the king with no documentation shows that she was a powerful lady in her own right. So that's impressive. Jeanne brought in a handful of witnesses who all swore that, yep, this dude promised all right. So the king ruled in her favor, and Olivier had to sit there and publicly admit that she was right. Hilariously though, dragging her husband to court didn't ruin their marriage. If anything, it made it better. Olivier didn't get mad. He was impressed. Power respects power, I guess. So the two kept running their estates together and had more kids, like 2 peas in a pod. But like all fairy tales, there was no happy ever after for these two lovebirds. Things were about to get a bit rocky. First, Brittany's ruler died without a clear heir, throwing the whole region into a war of succession. One faction was backed by France, one was backed by England, and because history loves confusing plotlines, the French side was led by a woman named Jeanne, the English side was taken over by a woman named Jeanne, and our girl Jeanne de Clisson was right in the middle of it all. 3 Jeannes, 2 kings, and half of Brittany switching teams every 20 minutes. And if you're expecting Jean Grey to pop up right about now, guess what? She doesn't. Jeanne's husband Olivier initially fought for the French-backed side, but during a battle at Vence, he was captured by English forces, and then released suspiciously fast for a surprisingly low ransom. French King Philip VI immediately got paranoid. Was Olivier a traitor? Had he cut a secret deal with England? It was more than just a little sus. But instead of investigating properly, King Philip invited Olivier to a royal jousting tournament in Paris. Seems like a weird way to test someone's loyalty, but okay, let's watch some dudes poke each other with sticks and eat some food, dude. So Olivier showed up expecting horses and fine dining, only to be ambushed, arrested, and thrown into a dungeon for treason. Now, Jeanne didn't just sit home, wringing her hands, hoping for her hubby's release. As far as she was concerned, this was some royal BS, and she wasn't having it. She immediately launched a rogue operation to break her husband out, literally bribing a royal sergeant to delay the trial and help him escape. But her plan failed. The sergeant got arrested, and the French government put Jeanne's name on an official list of condemned traitors. Great, that went well. Olivier's still in jail, and now Jeanne's a wanted woman. After about 5 months in jail, in August of 1343, Philip executed Olivier. But he didn't stop there. He put Olivier's remains on public display outside of Paris and sent his head to the city of Nantes, posted above the city gate. Absolutely brutal. the French crown basically turned poor Olivier into a 14th century roadside billboard. King Philip thought this would terrify the rest of the rebels into submission. Instead, the angry nobles back in Brittany immediately rallied around Jeanne, and they weren't offering condolences to a grieving widow. They were reporting for duty. Jeanne didn't waste a second. She assembled 400 armed followers and launched phase 1 of her revenge campaign. She knew exactly where to start, by attacking a French-controlled town. It was a walled-in town, but don't worry, Jeanne was not a quitter. Using pure deception, she got her forces past the initial gates, ambushed the garrison, and then wiped out the French soldiers inside. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was calculated, military-grade infiltration. It required serious money, intelligence, local backing, and obviously an army of men willing to commit high treason for her. When French forces mobilized to crush her, Jeanne executed phase 2. She moved the problem offshore. She acquired a fleet of ships, took to the English Channel, and started hunting down French merchant vessels. A medieval Norman chronicler explicitly refers to her as a pirate, laying siege to any French ship that she crossed paths with. Now, unlike the legends that circulate about Jeanne's incredible fleet, the ships probably weren't black, and the sails almost definitely weren't blood red, but they were still absolutely terrifying. Nearly every French sailor who crossed her path met a very permanent end. She only spared a handful of survivors for the sole purpose of sending them back to the French king with peat pants and a message. Jeanne is coming, and she doesn't do mercy. And somehow, she must have gained the King of England's support at some point during all of this, because right on cue, the Pope sent emergency letters to England's King Edward III, demanding that he stop his allies from committing hostile acts at sea during the truce. We can't officially prove Jeanne was the only person the Pope was talking about, but the timing was definitely a little sus. And France had no clue what the hell to do. They couldn't seem to stop Jeanne or her fleet, so instead, the French government held a trial in her absence, banished her from the realm, and confiscated all her property. But Jeanne would not sail quietly into that dark night. Oh no, she still had plenty of energy left, and she kept the attacks coming. By 1347, England and France signed the Treaty of Calais to pause the war. King Edward III of England included a specific list of allies who were legally protected by the truce. Jeanne de Clisson was on that list, named explicitly as an international military ally. Surprise! Guess she did have England's blessing after all. And now she was able to walk away from her decade plus of wild piracy and French takedown free and clear. Even better, Edward restored her property and income access as well, so now she has freedom and money. But what's a girl to do with all this new free time? I guess getting remarried sounded like a good idea, because it wasn't long before she married an English military commander named Walter Bentley. Now this was the ultimate power couple. Bentley brought direct access to the English military. Jeanne brought local status, property, and a relentless hatred for the French crown. It was a match made in heaven. When King Philip VI finally died in 1350, Jeanne was still out there, managing properties, fighting court battles, and outliving her worst enemy. She died around 1359, but the story doesn't end there, because history saved the absolute wilder-than-fiction plot twist for her family. Jeanne's youngest son, Olivier Jr., grew up in England while his mom was waging her maritime war. As an adult, he initially fought against France, just like his mother. But later in life, he switched sides. He entered the service of both King Charles V and then Charles VI of France. And in 1380, this very son of Jeanne de Clisson, the woman convicted of treason for spending 13 years destroying French ships and their crews, was named Constable of France, making him the highest-ranking military officer in the entire kingdom. Now, the French crown executed his father. His mother declared war on the empire, and one generation later, France handed him the keys to the entire army. Like, what is it with this family? Talk about power moves on power moves. Jeanne's granddaughter Margaret, aka Countess Marguerite de Clisson, has her own unhinged backstory. Drop a comment if you want to hear about Margaret's story. And if you think Jeanne trading silk dresses for a pirate fleet sounded extreme, check out our episode on Catherine Montgolfier, the woman who ran a secret poison-for-hire business right under the nose of King Louis XIV. That one's linked in the show notes. Until then, keep your receipts, cause a little chaos, and remember, red and black are power colors, babe.